Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. News on Channel 2. Thank you for joining us, and we start with our news headlines. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli inspects a number of development and services projects in Althanya Governorate. Sudan welcomes the African Union decision to lift its suspension after transitional government appointed. And British lawmakers prepare court action to enforce Brexit delay. And now to the news in full. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli inspected a number of development and services projects in Althanya Governorate. The Prime Minister's tour included Samalud Bridge Access Project, which extends for 24 kilometers to link the Nile eastern and western banks with a cost of 1.5 billion Egyptian pounds. The Prime Minister was accompanied by Ministers of Health, Transportation, Housing and Agriculture. The Ministry of Transportation said it has drawn up a comprehensive plan to carry out 7 axes on the river with total cost of 9.5 billion pounds. Prime Minister Madbouli also inspected construction works and final preparations of Samalud Public Hospital. Madbouli stressed the importance of finalizing all development and services projects in accordance with the preset timeline to improve the living standards of citizens and improve services offered to them.
الدولة الوحيدة اللي واقفة على حيلها انتم. قد يكون في أخطاء، قلت لكم المشكلة كبيرة، والمشكلة دي أنا مش هقدر عليها لوحدي، لكن نقدر عليها كلنا. دوري عملته، بس دوركم انتوا دلوقتي. لما طلبتوني لقيتوني، ولم أبخل عليكم بحياتي. جه الدور عليكم وانتوا وعدتوني انكم هتقفوا جنبي. الإصلاح بياخد وقت طويل، ولازم نعترف ان ال6 سنين اللي فاتوا ان احنا دولة ظروفها صعبة. تحيا مصر مش بالكلام.
مفيش أي حل تاني غير إن احنا نشتغل.
شايفة مستقبل أولادي ومستقبل أجيال كتيرة جاية في مصر.
نقدر نعمل أكتر من كده، نقدر نجتهد، نقدر نعمل حاجات كتير في أرضنا.
ما تتخلوش عن بالكم، أنا اخترت الطريق الصعب. انتوا اللي هتحددوا مصير مستقبل مصر بقوة شبابها.
Cairo Criminal Court sentenced Brotherhood terrorist group Guidance, Mohammed Badia and others to a life imprisonment in their retrial in a case dubbed as illegal crossing of borders and attacking prisons. The court also sentenced 8 others to a 15 years toughened imprisonment in the same case. Sudan welcomed the African Union AU decision to lift its suspension of Sudan's membership in the bloc, ending a 3-month freeze, expressing high appreciation to the AU under the current chairmanship of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. The decision came after Sudanese Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdouk announced the members of the new cabinet. Meanwhile, the African Peace and Security Council stressed its commitment to support Sudan's efforts in reconstruction as well as efforts to activate international ties. The Israeli occupation forces carried out a series of airstrikes in Gaza, claiming they were in response to rockets fired from Gaza on the illegal settlements. No casualties were reported in the attack. The incident came hours after 2 Palestinian teenagers were killed by the Israeli occupation troops during clashes on the Gaza border. Britain's opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn said the Labour Party will not support a general election until Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he will adhere to new legislation blocking a no-deal British departure from the European Union on October 31st. Details.
British opposition Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn said that lawmakers are preparing legal action in case the country's Prime Minister Boris Johnson tries to defy legislation compelling him to seek a further delay to Brexit. An opposition bill which would force Johnson to ask the European Union for an extension to Britain's departure to avoid an October 31st exit without a transition deal was approved by Parliament's appointed upper chamber, the House of Lords, on Friday. Queen Elizabeth is expected to sign it into law on Monday. Johnson, a leader of the campaign to leave the EU during the 2016 Brexit referendum, took office in July after Conservative Party predecessor Theresa May quit following 3 failed attempts to get a deal with Brussels through Parliament. The new Prime Minister vows to take Britain out of the EU on October 31st with or without a deal with the bloc. Johnson has said he has no intention of seeking an extension and would rather, quote, die in a ditch than delay Brexit.
U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper said today he was not surprised Iran had turned on advanced centrifuges to increase uranium stockpiles, a further breach of the 2015 nuclear deal, which Washington pulled out of last year. Esper was in France after visits to London and Stuttgart, Germany, to meet with NATO allies since taking up his post in July. Earlier today, Iran said it has fired up advanced centrifuges to boost its enriched uranium stockpiles in the latest scaling back of commitments under a crumbling 2015 nuclear deal. These came as Britain, France and Germany announced they have engaged in talks to try to rescue the 2015 deal that gave Iran relief from sanctions in return for curbs on its nuclear program. Iran said today it seized a boat and arrested 12 Filipinos as it busted a fuel smuggling ring in the Strait of Hormuz. The seizure comes amid tensions in the Gulf after the United States unilaterally withdrew from a nuclear deal, putting curbs on Iran's nuclear program in return for relief from sanctions. France and other EU nations have been trying to ease tensions in the Gulf region since President Donald Trump reimposed sanctions on Iran. Pakistan said today that it had denied India's President Ram Nath Kovind permission to fly through its airspace access, to which is usually granted due to New Delhi's recent behavior. The decision comes at a time of high tension between the two nuclear-armed South Asian neighbors over the disputed Himalayan region of Kashmir. Pakistan had closed its airspace to Indian traffic in February after a suicide bomb attack killed dozens of Indian troops in Kashmir, ratcheted up tensions between the two neighbors and prompted tit-for-tat earlier dogfights. It reopened its skies for all civilian traffic in July, ending months of restrictions that had affected major international routes. Egypt and South Sudan reviewed means to activate and expand fields of cooperation in the petroleum sector in a way to achieve mutual interest. These came during a meeting between representatives of the Egyptian and South Sudanese Ministries of Petroleum and Mineral Resources, during which the Egyptian side expressed readiness to offer any needed assistance to South Sudan in the field of industrial development. The meeting also discussed means to form joint committee to follow up the implementation of agreements signed between the two countries in the petroleum field. The General Authority for Industrial Development announced that economic ties between Egypt and China remarkable increase since 2014, with a number of agreements and accords signed earlier between the two countries in various fields. The authority added that Egypt is considered a key partner in the Chinese Belt and Road Development Initiative, which was launched 6 years ago with the aim of achieving sustainable development. White House Economic Advisor Larry Kudlow said the United States wants near-term results from U.S.-China trade talks in September and October, but cautioned that the trade conflict could take years to resolve. Kudlow said that although the United States and China have been negotiating on trade and intellectual property issues for 18 months, the 14-month U.S.-China trade war has escalated sharply since May, when talks broke down after Beijing backtracked on earlier commitments to make changes in law to improve intellectual property protections, curb the forced transfer of U.S. technology to Chinese firms, and improve U.S. access to Chinese markets.